Welcome to VSF Live, Vintage Science Fiction Live, and this is our 10th book in the Ballantine Classic Library of Science Fiction. Matt, Ira, and I have been doing this for over a year and a half, or almost a year and a half now. We're about halfway through the 21 books in the series, and we're going to welcome you for the first time live. And it's really good to have my friends here. Matt from Science Fiction Reads, as I said, and Ira from SF Words of Wonder. And it's good to have you here too. Matt, maybe we should just start with, you want to say anything a little bit about your channel, and then we'll go to Ira, and then we'll check in with some of the viewers and see who's here.
Sure. I just, well, these days I upload pretty sporadically, but I like reading and talking about what I've read, and it's mostly old science fiction, like 30s up to the 80s and 90s, which is kind of what we're all into. So I was happy to meet you guys and start this project.
Actually, I have a question. Can you remember exactly how this came together? Because I remember we're starting to collect these best of series, but I can't remember exactly how the suggestion came back or together to do this here.
I know I have read a few of these. Like, I had previously read a few of them and was talking about them to you guys because I was trying to get you guys to read the best of C.L. Moore.
We'll get there.
Yeah, I forget.
Yeah, I think we were just like during book hauls, we would find one and we just kept talking about it. And then I know I had been wanting to do some sort of collaborative video, and I don't know who came up with the idea, but it's been a lot of fun reading through these.
You know what? I have a feeling that it was you, Ira, because I think that you're sort of the first of our group here that wanted to go into those type of videos. And so happy that you did that. And Ira, do you want to say anything about your channel?
I read kind of the same books Matt's talking about. Every once in a while, I read a little bit more modern science fiction or other, maybe a little fantasy here and there and a little horror there here and there. But mostly do just kind of like individual book reviews and lots of book hauls. Got to fill up my shelves. So.
And I just noticed we're like the map of North America here. I'm in Manitoba, Canada. We've got Matt in Toronto, Canada, or I mean in Ontario, Canada. He's not in Toronto itself. And then down in the United States, we've got Ira in Montana. Yep. So let's say hi to some of the people here. Liminal is, at least before that broadcast, he was ready to look forward to it. We've got Booktuber. I'm trying to remember what his name is. But anyways, it's 6 a.m. Oh, there, Lawrence. There we go.
Wow.
So that's 6 a.m. So it's 12 hours. Sephirus is here. There he is. Liminals. Where a go. Tom, thank you. Hi. Captain Infinity has got a cup of tea, I would imagine there. Pulp Mortem Jake is with us. Let's rock.
Yeah,
Matt.
I agree.
Yeah, you did a good job setting up that library.
And the cat, too. Don't forget about the cat there.
That is one of two fat cats.
Rockets Away. You know what? This actually fits in very well with the Rocket Summer that I'm doing with Michael K. Vaughan. This might be more the 1950s and 60s because of the stories that we're looking at today. We're going to be working on looking at Frederik Pohl, the best of Frederik Pohl, and the stories within there. There we go. They got the hard copies with the John Berkey cover. I've got the soft cover here.
You got that one too, Matt?
I don't think I do. No.
Very nice yellow text block to it as well. It's yeah. By the way, when that came out, it was 1975. Frederik Pohl was still with us, and he hadn't even written Gateway yet. Gateway was coming out in 1977. So even though this is a best of Frederik Pohl, this is a best of, say, his first half of his career.
Yeah, and he mentions when Lester Del Rey put together these stories, they kind of came up with an arbitrary thing. Anything he had written before the age of 50, I think he said. And at the time he was like 54. So there was maybe like 4 years in there that nothing came out. So we need a part 2 with everything he wrote from age 50 to 93, because he lived to be 93.
Yeah. Hear us, Ballantine? All right. Who else we got here? We got, I think he's commenting to the Rockets Up and loves that library. We got a new science fiction reader here. This is awesome.
Nice.
Great. Welcome, Marianne. And there you go. Mississauga is nice this time of year. Captain Finity has an idea where you're at. Do you know Captain Finity?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay.
Yeah. That is Ilya, named after a Alistair Reynolds character from his novel Revelation Space.
That a very big tribble. That was a deep Star Trek reference. Hi, Casper. Coffee. Okay. Wine, pizza, inventions.
That Canadian bacon, huh?
Well, you know what? A Canadian pizza is typically bacon and is it pepperoni? Yeah, I think so. Bacon and pepperoni that people have, or back bacon. Bacon is always part of our culture up here.
Well, we call it that little like round piece of ham. We call it Canadian bacon, but I don't think you guys do, right?
Probably back bacon normally.
You just call it bacon because you're Canadian, so.
That's right. And Brian is here, and there's Sephra saying hi to Brian. Okay, so we'll random guess. His mom is originally from Mississauga. I don't even know for sure if that's your area. I know you're
2 hours away,
north of Toronto. Yeah. All right, so let's get back into what we're doing here. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a bio for Frederik Pohl. I just wrote a few things down here. We already talked about that he lived to 93 years old. He was born 1919, 2013. He was a writer, editor, and fan. He spanned 75 years in terms of publication. And he was an editor of Galaxy and If magazines, took over from very famous editor Horace Gold, and he edited from 1959 to 1969. Had mentioned Gateway in 1977 as his most famous novel, Hugo, Nebula, John W. Campbell Awards. Named a Grand Master and also into the Hall of Fame for science fiction. One of the things that I found very interesting about him is that he's one of the Futurians, which was a fan club in New York that basically had the people who started up publishing and editing magazines that we know today. And, there would be people like Isaac Asimov, Donald Wollheim, Damon Knight, Cyril Kornbluth. And this started up in the 1930s. He helped organize the first World Convention of 1939. So, and that's when he was at the age of 20. So he's quite involved quite early. And then off in World War II, he was stationed in Italy. He was with the 456th Bombardment Group, married 5 times. And one of the reasons that I chose Frederik Pohl for this one here is that he had done lots of collaborations, including with C.M. Kornbluth, who is the last person that we had reviewed. So I thought it just seemed natural that he would be reviewed today. And we had, he did some with Jack Williamson, about 10 novels, and also Lester Del Rey. This series, I do want to mention that we do have a playlist for it. And in my playlist, we have the 10 that we're going to be, this will be the 10th one. But I also have one more. And Ira, you made a video about this whole series, didn't you?
Yeah, I'm basically collecting and showing every paperback that's in there, which there was, I think, 21. They added 2 later. And then I also collected, there's not a book club edition of every book, but I forget the exact count. I think there was maybe 12 or something book club editions. And they never came out in retail. They all went straight to book club. There was a couple oddities from some other publishers that later came out too that I mentioned, but I didn't have any of those.
Yeah. So if you want to see all the covers of them, you can go and see that video within our playlists. So what we usually do, if this is your first time here watching our reviews of the best of, we usually just go around and talk about a short story, one that we found interesting. So let me just check in here see if there's any comments we need to just check here. There's just one more. Joe has made it. Hey, awesome. Okay, we'll see you later then, Joe. All right, here we go. So Matt, you want to talk about one of the stories from the book?
Sure. I think I'm going to start with my favorite.
I'm just going to say that there was 19 stories in this book. So there's lots here. We won't be able to talk about them all, but go ahead, Matt.
The very first story in this collection, I think, was probably my favorite. And that is The Tunnel Under the World from 1955. And I kept turning back to the front to be like, when was this written? And I've got a huge amount of notes here I'm going to refer to a bit to refresh my memory. But it's kind of a Groundhog Day story. It was hard not to picture the protagonist as Bill Murray. But it starts with our main character, whose name is Guy. I can't remember his last name. But
Burkhart, right?
Burkhart?
I think so.
Okay. It starts with him waking up on the morning of June 15th from a terrible nightmare. All he really remembers is an explosion. And so he wakes up a little shaken because it was very realistic. And he goes downstairs, greets his wife. She had the same dream. That's weird. But he goes on with his day. He's taking the bus to work and notices over the radio advertisements for products he's never heard of. And then he gets off the bus and goes to a little shop to buy a pack of his cigarettes, and the guy there is really pushing a brand he's never heard of. That's kind of weird. He goes into work, and he works for this big chemical company, Contro Chemicals. He works like in the head office in town, and outside of town there's the main plant, this is cool for 1955. It's run by not AIs, but machines that have had like the brain scans of scientists taken and put into them. So it's like they are machines, but they're based off the recordings of people who could have done the job themselves, kind of thing, but it's all automated. So that's pretty neat. And he goes into work. His boss is out for the day, which is unusual, and he has to kind of pick up the slack, which is strange. And then on his way home, he's confronted by kind of a casual acquaintance, his friend Swanson, who's really run down looking, and calls him over and just kind of stares into his eyes and wanders off. And he thinks, boy, this is a weird day. I don't know what's wrong with Swanson. He goes back home. And the last weird thing that happens to him is, as he's in bed, he is very consciously aware of the moment he just falls asleep, almost like he's unconscious suddenly. And the next day is similar. He wakes up, and he wakes up from a nightmare. But the reader, interestingly, is aware that it's still June 15th. He's woken up on the same day. Guy is not aware of this. And it's similar to the previous day. There's a lot of advertising and like viral marketing things going on that it's very unusual, and always for products he's never heard of. And he goes into work, and again, the boss is called in or whatever. one of the viral marketing things is like a truck with a loudspeaker that's just blaring these ads for a freezer company, and he's really annoyed by this. And I can't remember what kind of freezers they are. There's like a corny brand name for them, but anyway, a representative gets in touch with him because he called the cops. And he meets her at a diner for lunch, and she apologizes on behalf of the company for the annoyance and somehow talks him into buying a freezer.
Mm-hmm.
And again, on his way home, he runs into Swanson. Swanson is weird. Something's not right with him. And he gets home, and his wife has also bought a freezer because she is contacted by a representative. So again, a very weird day. And it ends with him like blowing a fuse, like a light switch or something. So he goes downstairs to fix this, and he's moving a trunk in the basement to get to the fuse box, and he notices underground. I promise I'm not going to spoil the whole thing. I'm only going up to a certain point. When he moves the trunk in the basement floor, it's metal underneath. The floor is all shiny metal. And he starts looking around and breaking up the concrete. It's metal underneath. It's the basement wall. He cracks it open. It's metal there too. And then he notices the little wooden boat he's been working on. All the progress he made, it's back to the beginning. None of the work is done. And as he's underneath it inspecting, the clock strikes midnight again, and he very consciously notices himself fall asleep. And he wakes up on the 15th again, but something is different. This time he's aware it's June 15th. Nobody else is. He's the only one. And again, the weird marketing, the girl that talked him into, what was it? The girl that talked him into buying a freezer is at that diner again. But now she's selling cigarettes or something, and this is very strange. But while he's at work, he gets a call from Swanson, and he goes, "Swanson, what are you doing? Why are you bothering me?" And Swanson's like, "Oh, excellent. We need to meet up, and I have to explain something to you." So they meet up, and Swanson basically tells him, they meet up at the restaurant, and that's when Guy notices this woman who the previous day was a freezer representative. Today she's selling cigarettes, and he calls her out, and she runs away. And this alerts Swanson. Swanson's very frazzled. He takes Guy across the street, and he's like, "Look, they're on to us. I'm going to tell you what's going on." And takes him into the theater, and they go into a side room, and Swanson basically explains, "Look, I know you're freaking out, but I'm kind of in on this. I'm aware it's the same day. I don't know how much we want to reveal, but Swanson basically, how far do we want to go here?" Swanson's like, "Look, you came to me about 2 months ago, and you were all freaked out, and I took you into my house, and we hid in this room that only locks from the inside, and you told me all this crazy stuff, and then we both fell unconscious. And the next day, it was June 15th, and Guy goes, "June 15th, 2 months ago?" And Swanson's like, "Yes. The next day, you woke up and thought it was June 15th, but for the last 2 months, I've been going to bed in my room and waking up, and it's always June 15th. How are you aware of it again?" "Oh, I fell asleep in the basement." And this leads them to this conspiracy. What is going on with the town that they live in? Why is there weird marketing going on? Why are they only aware? Other than a couple people, Swanson has figured out a few people, like the refrigerator woman. She seems to change jobs every day. She's a different person. There's a few people like that. So Swanson's a little bit onto the conspiracy, and now Guy is into it too. And there's like two different reveals, and they're both like very Philip K. Dick. And the first one I saw coming, the second one blew me away. I thought it was one of the best stories I've ever read.
Yeah, and perhaps we should stop there. I mean, some people probably are going to try and guess some of these already, but what is amazing but I mean, I always talk about Twilight Zone. I love that show. This would have been very perfect episode, better than some of the episodes I think on Twilight Zone, for the way it had those double reveals. It really is it's a big commentary on advertising, and that's why advertising is featured prominently in it.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Pohl liked to do a lot of satire on
Mhm.
advertising, mostly from what I've read, but capitalism and everything else in between, kind of.
And about with this story, he said, I think it was in the afterword, maybe. He said this is his belief of what advertising companies would do if they had complete power over people.
Right.
And it's really good. And he peppers things throughout the story, a little bit of info about the chemical company, Swanson continually approaching him. Just the way he leads you into this mystery was really, really intriguing. I think it was the perfect story for opening the collection.
Yeah, it was.
And it completely made sense. His clues added up, and we were there.
I read it a second time.
Yeah.
It was that good.
Yeah, I read a story a couple months ago. It was either a short story or a novel, and I was doing some research on it, and someone mentioned this, and this was before we decided we were going to do Frederik Pohl. So I read The Tunnel Under the World a couple months ago, and I was blown away. And then I reread it. It's a perfect opportunity, knowing what you know, and then reading it again. And it's a perfectly crafted short story, I think.
And I have to figure PKD was influenced by this. I mean, some of the stuff, I can't remember what year Second Variety came out. It was definitely 50s, but it might have been 54. And stuff like that. Some of his stories had to have taken inspiration from this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he and C.M. Kornbluth had just written Gravy Planet, I think something like 1949 or 1950. I think it was published in 51 or 52, turned into The Space Merchants, which lots of people have seen, still on sale today. And if you think about some of the things from Space Merchant, I just written down, he loved talking about or having stories about things that not a lot of science fiction writers did: business, finance, PR work, advertising. There's even a political story in here. And I like that about him, that he looked at those, and often with some sort of a satirical edge to it. But he also wrote a couple horror stories too, which I enjoyed in here as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like a lot of these stories are not your typical science fiction. There's no multiverse or time travel or a lot of other big tropes that we've come across.
True.
I mean, I love all those things in science fiction, but yeah, his stories are like kind of like Kornbluth. A lot of the characters are average people or really down to earth stories kind of thing.
Let's take a chance just to go back to our comments, and then we'll go to Ira for your story. Jeff is here. He's in Japan, I believe. 8 a.m. over there. Thanks for joining us, Jeff. And 12:20 a.m. I think Sephiros must be over in Europe somewhere then. I'm not sure I know you, Sailor's Green Eyeball. Welcome. Good old Chris in New Mexico. And there he goes. He agrees with you, or he probably said that while you were talking about the story. Sounds a little bit like Philip K. Dick. Different cigarettes, same day. It's different products even on those days. It's very interesting. I think all these viewers would really enjoy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and looking at the comments, all the guesses are wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome. It's great to have you, Chris. Boy, we got a few people from Asia. I just think of a time travel police.
That was Tunnel Under the World is one I'd put up there with some of the best that we read from Kornbluth, and then the Lewis Pageant stories from Kuttner and Moore that were just kind of some of those mind-blowing stories.
Yeah, I've been making a list for a couple months now of just favorite short stories, because someday when I post regularly, I'd like to do just a series of short stories you should read. And it would just be a bunch of the best ones I've come across, and this would be one of them.
Oh, that'd be a tough list to make, I think. You've
It's
read a lot of short stories.
it's quite a long list.
All right, Ira, you want to talk about a story?
Yeah, so that was Tunnel Under the World was probably my second favorite, very close to the first, but the one I liked the most was Three Portraits and a Prayer. And this was from 1962. And you basically had a scientist who was getting close to dying as he's at the end of his life. And he had been working for this guy for some, high tech power generation is kind of what he thought it was going to be. But it turns out this guy he was working for had other ideas and wanted to use this technology for weapons. And so the scientist kind of finds out about this, and he ends up having a lot of guilt. And so he goes about trying to kind of trick this egoist out of his plans. And the story is really good, but what really stood out, there's like the last section is a letter that the scientist writes to this guy. And it's like like this beautiful letter. And you would think it would be, he's mad and all this stuff, but it's just, Pohl can capture humanity really well and a bunch of different ideas and concepts in that thing. It's one of those things where sometimes when you're reading something, you feel like someone's writing it directly for you. That was a moment reading that thing for me. And it was just like really great. And then there was this last little bit he kind of put in there, like in this infinite universe, like we'll see each other again at some point, like it's another very interesting concept to think about.
Yeah, so I didn't care for the story, but maybe my second favorite thing in the whole book was that letter. Like, I absolutely loved that letter, and the scientist's explains his reason for what he did and his hope that, in an infinite universe with infinite possibilities, everything is bound to repeat, and hopefully, their atoms will realign and they'll meet again under some other star. It was poetic.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very different. It's not one that you could really spoil too much. And I believe that was a shorter one, if I remember right. There wasn't a huge setup. But yeah, something about that one. I'll call it a tie with Tunnel Under the World. How about that?
Oh, there's also Three Portraits and a Letter or something like that, right?
That's the one.
Yeah. So, yeah. And there actually were three portraits in there of the different characters.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah. There's a whole nother story, right?
In terms of.
No, it's called Three Portraits and a Prayer.
A Prayer, that's right.
Yeah.
Now, Ira, I know that you've said that you've got into reading quite a bit of Frederik Pohl. I know that you've read some of the Gateway novels. Tell me what attracts you to Pohl's writing.
Well, it wasn't what I thought. The Gateway was, Man Plus was the first one I read, and he does go places that a lot of other authors don't really touch, like psychology, kind of like Man Plus is kind of borderline horror at times, and he's an amazing writer. It don't always like what he tends to write about, but if you read through the Gateway novels, he'll always get to some point where you're like, oh no, this is inappropriate. I hope he's not going there. And then he kind of like pulls back. He doesn't go all the way in like some of the other authors. So he's kind of weird in that aspect. His ideas are amazing. And, even reading Gateway and stuff, there is a little satire in there, but I really like many years ago, I really fell in love with Kurt Vonnegut and his brand of satire. And I never would have thought Frederik Pohl. You look at the man, you look at all the books he published, and it's like, this guy's a satirist, you know, basically. Most of everything I've read from him has some, you know, he's pointing out some flaws in a witty way that makes you kind of think about it. And it's just, yeah.
And you know, I don't generally like novels or stories with satire, but Frederik Pohl's I can handle. There's a gentle conceptual satire, but then he sort of really plays it straight through the rest of the story, I find.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I appreciate about it.
There's a strong plot. It's not a complete absurdity. So there's always like an interesting plot and ideas going on, but the way he makes you think, it's not always like, I love the thought-provoking aspects of hard science fiction and these astronomical events that are happening, but his are things I probably wouldn't have liked his writing if I was reading this back in my 20s. But as I've gotten older, it's just like, I don't know, it's just been hitting for me.
Well, let's take a look at the comments ago. See here. Sephiros noticed the poster here. Garth Marenghi.
Yeah. Garth Marenghi is a very obscure British comedy. There's only 6 episodes.
I watched one, Matt.
Pardon?
I watched one after you were talking about it.
Was it the first one?
Yeah.
What did you think?
It was different.
Well, here's the thing. Other than science fiction, my other big passion is comedy, like sketch comedy. Like I grew up watching Monty Python and stuff like that, so I'm very acclimated to the absurd. And Garth Marenghi is as absurd as you can get. It was filmed in the early 2000s, but it was made to look like a poorly produced 80s hospital horror drama.
I looked at maybe about 2 minutes of it.
I had a couple clips.
I did that, but
in one of my videos, I put in a couple clips of my favorite bits. But
yeah.
I mean,
maybe that's where I saw it.
I came across it like a decade ago, and quotes from that show are in my head every day.
Let's see. Some of them are talking about Phil K. Dick still, but just thank you for joining us. I'm not sure how I would say that name. And short stories was Ariane's entry. Awesome.
Yeah, that'd be a great video, Matt. The guy was brilliant, you know. He very knowledgeable.
Well, I hope that wasn't your last. Well, this is your second comment. I hope you continue to give us some comments. Love to hear what you think about some of these things too, Sailor's Green Eyeball. I'm not sure if I can say that all the time. PKD, there we go. Some more. There we go. Yep, I'm sure that's the exact same one that we have. Classic Library of Science Fiction is what they like to call it.
Yeah, and I think we've all talked about, like, not every story in these collections are great. There's a mix, but always
there's a good
memorable.
percentage, I think, in this book, though. Would you agree?
Oh, what?
Yep.
I think there's a pretty good percentage in this book, though.
Yeah.
Gateway, you know what? I read it a very long time ago, but I remember continuing on to read a couple other Heechee books, so I liked it. I will reread that someday. I know that Ira's pretty high on that. How about you, Matt? Have you read Gateway?
No, I tried it twice and DNF'd it, and I read halfway through Man Plus, and I DNF'd that too.
Okay.
But I'm gonna have to give him another shot book-wise, because I mean, I really enjoyed this collection.
Oh,
I didn't catch the coffee jokes. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, it got grotesque and horrific for sure. Man Plus did.
Like a body
Man Plus
grotesque?
had just such a bitter character, or they were all bitter, I think, or unlikable.
That's something that I gotta say. He doesn't always write like heroes. These are people full of flaws, and that puts a lot of people off. A lot of the things are kind of realistic, and people do bad things. And so, I mean, talking about some of the borderline inappropriate things and grotesque, horrific things, and being inside the head of desperate people in desperate times in the future, it's makes you uncomfortable at times.
I'm still suspicious that reality has actually rearranged around us. I always think of Lathe of Heaven by Le Guin when someone says things like that. Russell is with us. Welcome, Russell. I think you would. I think you would, Chris. It has enough plot and story to it that the satire, although it's right in your face there, it kind of blends into what he's doing. I'm thinking they're talking about that show of yours there, Matt.
Yeah.
I'm
not sure if it showed up on Adult Swim. All the 6 episodes are on YouTube. You can watch them there.
Sephiroth says, yes, it did. Okay. Yeah, you know what? I haven't read Lem's satire yet, so I will get there. I think Futurological Congress is one that people talk about.
The short story collection about those robots had quite a bit of satire in it, too.
Siberiad?
Siberiad, yeah, very comical and full of satire. And
I just read my first Lem a couple weeks ago. It was good.
Short story or novel?
No, it was the novel The Invincible.
Oh, yeah. How did you like it?
The prose wasn't so great, but it was a translation of a translation. It was translated
the 1973 one, yeah.
Yeah, from German to English.
Yeah.
I did like it, though. It was dark and moody, and yeah, it was good.
It was originally written, I think it was 1963, and I was just amazed at the nanotechnology involved in that novel. Knowing when he wrote it. There is a more modern translation that I used as well when I read that one. I'm very high on that one, but of course we can disagree if we want to. I really enjoyed it. Unstoppable, I think, agrees, and he says there's real pathos in Man Plus. And there's just a couple more here. I think he's going to watch for that show that we were talking about that was on Adult Swim, perhaps.
Yeah, Zeely is Stephen Baxter. I really want to read those.
I've read a couple and a bunch of the short stories, and they're really good.
Yeah, you recommended Vacuum Diagrams to me, so
that's a really good short story collection.
Kind of a good intro to the Zeely, right?
I don't remember if they're all Zeely, but some of them are.
I'm not sure I would use droll. What would you say, guys?
I mean, he puts a lot of satire in his stories, but it's not the whole. Well, I mean, you read like Space Merchants, and that is probably the most satirical one of his that I've read. But a lot of it, it's like he's pointing out in interesting ways current flaws in humanity or all kinds of different things, and where it could lead us. So you could take it as warnings, or I don't know. I wouldn't call him.
We may get to one of his satirical stories here in our discussion, and I'll just sort of save it for there. Deeply unpleasant character, Tom says, for Man Plus.
Yeah, even the main character in Gateway is very unlikable, unpleasant person.
Okay. Hey, welcome, Learning as Hobby.
Well, science fiction's a good hobby to have then.
Yeah, you're in the right place. Okay. He says, even if you don't like satire, it kicks in as one of the best SF he's read. I've liked Lem so far, so I'm looking forward to reading more. The next up for me will be Solaris. I'll be doing a buddy read with someone in August, I believe. We'll see. Agrees with Chris. And Dennis is with us, and he didn't overly care for some of the psych aspects of Gateway and Blue Event Horizon, Beyond the Blue Horizon. But his second reading, it looks like he likes it a little bit better.
That's the same thoughts I had, like the psychological aspects. Half of Gateway is basically the main character sitting in front of an AI shrink that he calls Siegfried von Shrink.
Right.
And I mean, they go through his whole twisted life. So, I mean, you're dealing with a lot of stuff there. Yeah.
I do like Invincible. It is a very militaristic novel, ultimately. I would agree.
Yeah, this is one I've seen around, and I would pass it by, but if I see the Last Theorem, I would pick it up, check it out.
I think he's finishing a novel that Clark didn't finish. I think this is after Clark passed that he did this one. I was doing some of this background reading for the stuff that I had at the beginning here, and I believe that's what it said.
Yeah, it wasn't like an active collaboration, but
that's right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Like if you follow it through, there's a reason he's got these characters, going through this. So yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Oh, Chris thinks Learning as a Hobby is a great name. Be sure to check out Chris's channel, Liminal Spaces there, Learning as a Hobby. I think you'll love it too. And he or she says thanks. Oh, going into some deep stuff here, from Female Man to Wolf's Book of the New Sun.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be a little bit of a challenge and a read. I haven't gone there yet. I finished The Dying Earth recently, and people talk about that as it's by Jack Vance, and that it's the new sun light. P&K point out the deep absurdity that you can take unregulated capitalism to.
Yep.
Yeah. And we'll catch up right here. Open script document. You guys are awesome. All right. So I'm going to talk about a story, and I'm going to take you to a place that we haven't talked about really with Pohl, except a little bit with Man Plus, that he can get to some grotesque places at time. There is a couple stories in here that I would actually say are basically horror stories. And the one I'm just going to talk about was called, whoops, can't even read my writing here. Grandy Devil. Was that what it was?
Yeah.
Grandy Devil, yeah.
Yeah, Grandy Devil. And our protagonist is George, and there's a knock at George's house. And he talks about, at the beginning, almost kind of biblically, about the background of his family, about this person begat this next person, all the way down to him. And so somebody knocks at the door named Gideon Usher. And I don't think Usher is just a random name picked out. I think that's a reference to Poe. And Gideon says, I'm here for Orville Dexter, who is George's dad that we've heard about. But Orville Dexter is not around. Gideon, we start to understand, is there because there's something very unsettled between him and Orville. This is a story I don't want to go very far in, but there is a period of trying to understand what's going on and why there is this problem between these two men. And we start to learn that there's aspects of living a long time here that people have lived, hundreds of years that we're talking about here, and that the people who begat each other here, some of them are referred to in the story as still alive, that should have been long dead. So there's a bit of a twist when George decides he's got to do something about this man Gideon, who won't leave his house until his dad returns, even if it's going to take a month before his dad returns. And so George does something about this, and ultimately the ending we find out is something that is very horrific to a person who seems to be immortal. If that person is really immortal, the not comeuppance, the solution that George comes up with is very brutal for that person involved. And I think I'll leave it there. I think that there's a number of stories that potentially we've seen in science fiction and horror that deal with immortality and what would be the worst situation you could be in if you were immortal and placed in that situation and were trapped, let's say. And this one reminded me a lot of those, and I just went, this is very different from all the other stories I've read. We've talked about, psychology, business, finance, advertising, but this one was just straight out horror movie of the evening kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a darker version of one of the Kuttner stories we read. He also has a family of immortals who live in the South, and wasn't there a reporter who kept poking around trying to learn about them?
Yes.
And they dealt with him in a less gruesome fashion, less dark.
And there's different ways to immortality. This one I don't think is really defined. They just are.
Yeah, it's a pretty short one too, if I remember.
Yeah.
Kind of sets it up and then serves you up.
There's a lot of these authors in these days that wrote multiple genres. They would go through horror, science fiction, fantasy, into mystery, men's adventure even. And they just had no problem sort of flowing from one to the other. And I kind of like that. It seems like people get pigeonholed quite easily nowadays into what they can do and can't do.
Yeah, see, like I think it wasn't even properly defined back then. People were writing a mixture of fantasy, horror, science fiction. Just was a natural blend.
I was recently reading EC Comics Weird Science and Weird Fantasy. They're comic books that came out in the early 1950s before the Comic Code came into effect. Part of the reason the Comic Code came into effect. And that's the same place that they had Tales of the Crypt and other horror comics as well. And this reminded me very much of an EC comic story. It could have been easily adapted, I think, as one, although I think it was written later than the comics. I don't know. Have either of you ever read EC comic work?
No.
No?
No.
Oh, they had people like Wally Wood, Frank Frazetta, Ray Bradbury had some stories adapted by them. Very interesting company. When they kind of folded their comics that didn't meet comics code, they ended up starting a magazine called Mad Magazine.
Mm.
Oh.
You know, What Me Worry, Alfred E. Newman.
Huh.
So, all right, I didn't think I was going to go there, but anyways, we did. Oh, just the first book. Yes, I think you had made a comment in the video I made of that too. It's really easy to find the omnibus right now, but it has, just like your version of Frederik Pohl, it has one of those John Berkey spaceship type covers, hovering over a canyon or something, or a building, or a futuristic building. And Dying Earth is nothing like that.
Yeah, I have that.
But
Yeah.
it's a great way to get it because you get all four of the novels and they can be kind of collectible and hard to find. Even the later two that came out by like Bain are.
It's a good reading copy.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, it's worth it that way. And, I mean, we do love collecting older books,
Oh yeah.
but sometimes it's just a matter about reading these books, right? And I look forward to actually going further into that. It took Chris a long time to find that.
Yeah, I want to
Chris?
find the original Hillman edition paperback. That's the publisher Hillman was the first one to publish Dying Earth as a paperback, and it can go for quite a bit of money. And it was kind of pulpier paper, so if you find it, they're usually really beat up. And yeah,
Yes, that's the one with the girl in the shimmering nightgown
yeah,
cover.
yep.
The Chris is saying here it took him a long time to find it in the wild. One of the things about Chris is he has amazing used bookstores around him, and he's just maybe an hour away from Santa Fe, and that's where Roger Zelazny, George R.R. Martin, and other science fiction authors have kind of made their home in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And so there's actually some pretty cool science fiction stuff floating around there. I think that Albuquerque and Santa Fe are kind of a hotbed for science fiction. And I think Chris benefits from that. If I remember right, Chris has even found a book that used to be Roger Zelazny's, and he'll have some stories about that.
I don't know if there's a specific collection that has all of his horror stories, but they're probably just sprinkled in some of the collections.
I don't even know if there's enough, but
Yeah.
he did write quite a few stories.
Mm-hmm.
I just finished talking about the story Grandee Devil,
Frederik Pohl.
best of Frederik Pohl. Yeah.
Oh yeah, he got the Hillman.
That's not a bad price, I think, for the first edition. Nice.
Right.
All right, let's go for a round two here. You have another story, Matt?
Sure. Well, it's almost not even a story. Day Million was one of my favorites. It's from, let me see here, 1966. And it's a look at society 1,000 years from now. And it basically reads like Ian M. Banks' Culture series, like that society, or Neil Asher's Polity, like high tech. Some of the stuff I was surprised for a story from '66, much like you were saying with the Lem story. And it's a love story of sorts, but it's only like 5 pages, and it's just full of details about what life could look like 1,000 years from now. And it's really just a meet cute about, a human genetically modified girl. She's lives underwater. She's got a tail and gills. She's a dancer. That's what she does. Performance dancing or something. And she meets like a heavily modified spacer who's practically a cyborg. And they decide to get married, which really is just a small ceremony where they exchange like digital copies of each other that they can call up in their own privacy whenever they want and interact with. And yeah, it's really just a slice of life, but just jam full of like genetic manipulation, cyborg enhancements, like personality recordings, virtual environments, and choosing to die. There's a reference to, they have access to these digital copies of one another forever or until they choose to die, which is very Ian Banks, The Culture. Those characters are basically immortal, and lots of times in those books, characters decide to end their life.
Yeah, it was written really cool too. He like breaks the fourth wall. He's talking to you.
Yeah.
The narrator is very kind of experimental, and
he's making fun of the reader
yeah,
for not believing this or thinking it's absurd.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
I was just going to say, and in the afterword, by the way, Frederik Pohl has an afterword where he talks about some of these stories. before the book, the intro is from his friend Lester Del Rey. I think he actually collaborated with a book or two with Lester. And then afterwards, he responds to some of the stories and some of the things that Lester has said, which is very cool to have a best of collection with that response at the end. And you know what? I'm not going to say it if you guys know it. What was his? He talked about the origin of this story or how you should view this story. Do either of you remember what that was?
I mean, he was definitely looking, but it was like a million days past, you know, the birth of Christ or the death of Christ, I guess. And
I think it was actually a little bit different. I think he was saying that it was a million days from when he wrote it. So a million days in the future. He says, can you imagine what a million days into the past would be like, trying to tell Attila the Hun what we're like right now? And that was the impetus for the story. If, you know, what would I say to Attila the Hun? Well, what could the future be that would seem so bizarre to us right now?
And in 66, it probably was, you know, pretty wild to read this story. For me, I was just like, oh, I've read stuff like this 100 times in, you know, modern day science fiction, but it's what I love. So it was really cool to see, you know, stuff that like Banks and Asher are doing, but so long ago.
And you start to wonder if this was part of the genesis of their ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pohl was definitely ahead of his time for, you know, having female characters and minorities and all of this. And I was watching a conference one time where someone asked them, and like, you know, all types of different sexualities, everything. He just treated people like people. And this person asked him about that, and he just said, I've always, my whole life, I mean, a person's a person, no matter where they're from, what they look like, what their background is, everything. So it's he was definitely ahead of his time when it comes to that.
Yeah, a good voice for that civil rights time.
Yeah, and this book like broke all of those norms out completely and turned them upside down. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just check in. There's only a couple comments since then. Still talking about getting dying Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And genetic manipulation, emotional manipulation.
Genetic is better than emotion. Yeah. Depends on what you're being genetically modified into, I guess. Don't read my Man Plus.
Man Plus is the story of a person being changed into a person who can survive on Mars, right?
Yeah, without
basically
like a
making us into the alien that can survive.
And they get rid of anything that's not necessary.
Okay. I haven't read it.
Yeah.
That line sounds interesting.
Yeah.
What's necessary, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, you have another story.
Yeah, I was going to talk about Father of the Stars from 1964. There was a few of them in here that were a little bit longer. They almost had like chapters to them.
Yeah.
I tended to like, what's that?
Novelettes.
Yeah. And I tended to like those a little bit more. I feel like, you know, Kornbluth was like an expert at a very short, condensed story. Pohl, I've really liked when he can really have time to get into the characters and the plot and all that. And I think that, you know, just speculating, that's how maybe why they worked together so well, because you got both sides of that blended together. But that was just a side there. So Father of the Stars was this guy, another guy, he's in his 90s. He's like the end of his life. And he was the main person, call him like the program manager of this big project to build 26 starships and send them out all over the galaxy looking for other places where mankind could colonize. This is like the first time we'd done a project like this, and he was very instrumental. He was like the main driving force behind this, and he's kind of getting wheeled around. I think there's a couple old guys in some of these stories, but I believe he's going to like some banquets and kind of being wheeled around, and he's hearing some things, and he's kind of getting curious about what are they talking about? And people are kind of like hiding something from him. And it turns out that a new technology had been developed to travel faster than light. And so they were going to start sending these ships out, and they were basically going to beat these 26 ships out there. And everyone was afraid to tell him because it would just put his whole life's work and make it seem like meaningless. And so you get that's kind of set up. You get kind of a redemption arc a bit in this one, and the whole time he's like down on himself because everyone's trying to be like, "Hey, it's not your fault. It's not your fault." But the ending had a very like kind of bittersweet ending to it, and it was like kind of came out of nowhere. Wasn't sure where he was going with it, but I love the way he ended that one.
Yeah, it had a bit of an emotional punch to it.
Yeah.
It was, and it wasn't just, his life's work was going to be meaningless, but he felt like he had condemned 50,000 people on these 26 ships, to throw their life away.
Yeah, they were aging slower than normal, but they were still losing decades of their life by volunteering for this, right?
And one cool thing is while they were in some sort of suspended animation, some of them, to run the ship, had their minds transferred to the bodies of, what was it, chimpanzees?
Yeah.
Oh, so. Yeah.
Yeah,
so that was the other really cool part about it is...
Yeah, so they could still run the ship while their bodies are in suspended animation. And, I think he also felt bad that some of them were losing their humanity a bit. Because later when they kind of catch up to the one ship, and he's like, here's this guy who's been the captain of this ship for 30 years. He's been in this chimp body for 30 years. He's probably more chimp than human at this point. And it's all this turmoil in this guy's heart is just adding up. You really feel for him. Another one of my favorites.
Yeah, and the chimp idea was really cool, and it's barely touched on in this. This definitely could have been turned into a novel, I think. And I want to say one other thing real quick. A long time ago, I had this idea about mankind sends out a ship somewhere, and then there's a faster thing that's developed later, and they actually beat them there. So the ship shows up, and there's already people there and houses and everything. But I always knew it's like someone had to do this idea. And finally read this one. I'm sure there's many other examples of the same thing because it'd be an easy one to do.
I had a discussion with someone like a decade ago about that idea, and they're like, I wonder if anyone ever wrote that. And I know Alistair Reynolds has written a novel where that happens and a short story. And I can't think of any other examples, but at one point I had a list that was over 10 examples of it happening.
If you ever find that, let me know.
Yeah, because it's a really cool idea.
Yeah.
I seem to remember
there after, centuries, and humanity's already there.
Totally.
And you're not even going to have any prime real estate. It's already taken. And there's a great line about, they're not even going to be in the first chapter of the history book. They're just going to, they're 5 chapters in already on the planet.
Yeah.
I seem to remember a story by Cordwainer Smith. I'm trying to think of what it's called. It had a similar name to PKD's book, not A Scanner Darkly, but there's a scanner something.
Scanners Live in Vain.
Scanners live in vain. And it's kind of that poignant idea again, when the technology that they use to travel, something else catches up and surpasses it. And these people are kind of, I'll just call it, wrecked by being scanners. And this story reminded me of that one.
Yeah.
We have an interesting question here. Maybe Ira knows this one. Let's see if I can show it here. Man
Blood
Plus
music.
versus Greg Blood Music.
I think it's different. Like Man Plus has some like body horror aspects to it, and it's very psychological. This guy goes crazy, through this in a unique way. Blood Music is amazing, but that guy kind of just loses his humanity, right?
There's horror to blood music, though.
Oh,
Oh
definitely.
yeah,
I can't really comment because I've only read half of Man Plus.
it's not it's not gory at all. I mean, there's some vivid scenes that still stick with me with
it's
some of
like
the,
it's like a slow apocalypse or something,
yeah.
basically. Yeah.
Ira's audio was muffled at one point, but it came back, so I'll just
Good.
move on
Thanks
from that.
thanks for that. I kind of made sure my cords are all plugged in. So
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Corn Bluth can be almost over the top satirical too. I read the best of short story collection of his. He's kind of the science fiction writer's writer, so or so I have read, and I can see that.
yeah, he never. I mean, I think Space Merchants is probably his most well-known thing, and but like everybody talked about him that were other writers and in the field, but he just never like broke out and became a mainstream author.
And if you want to read just one story, viewers of his, I think it was called The Black Bag. It's a time travel story where a medical bag for a doctor goes into the past. Was that the name of it? The Black Bag?
I think
Something
it's
like
the
that.
Little Black Bag.
The Little Black Bag.
I think.
It's actually in the Science Fiction Hall of Fame Volume 1 as well, if you're looking for it,
Yeah.
which is a great anthology of great stories.
Yeah.
Audio is back. A report. I don't know Kafka, so
I found a couple of his books. It's
Mhm.
definitely nothing I would have thought I wanted to read before, but I'm kind of curious about him. Yeah.
Ape loses his apeness by becoming human.
Poor ape.
Scanners live in vain. There we go. Yeah, you guys are both right. And Chris is there, Little Black Bag. Good, thank you. And I think that's the Science Fiction Hall of Fame that I just mentioned. So I think we're caught up here. I'm going to just mention another story, which I would say is more to the satirical side, but I kind of found a bit of horror in it. The Richest Man in Levittown. I actually am not going to say too much about it, but there's a discovery made of a pill which could give you total recall. And we have sort of a funny situation with a family and their home, and the husband is staying home and taking care of the kid. Wife is going off to work. And of course, there happens to be a bottle of these pills there, and the baby seems to think they're candy and eats them all. And from there, we find out the results of what this total recall drug can do. It reminded me a bit of, I read recently, Odd John by Olaf Stapledon, where a person had advanced intelligence that sort of left the rest of humanity in the dust. That's sort of what happens here. And we see this baby move into roles which usually are for people way older than this baby, but this baby takes control as a toddler. It's almost too easy to spoil. I'll try to leave it there. This is satire, but horrific, and it also made me wonder how easy is it for somebody, some corporation, some person to take over a town, an area, a country even. Are we that vulnerable? And I mean, I don't want to go too much into politics or anything like that, but there's dangers that many countries have faced, and it makes you wonder what's the result of having total recall is sort of a science fictional area here, but what's the cautionary part of this tale? What are things that it's saying about our society that we would be so susceptible to a fantastic situation?
Yeah, and it was pretty funny in the beginning, like the family that this baby lives with. It's like a man and wife and two kids, and he inherited just a ton of money from like his uncle, and they're getting just badgered nonstop by telephone calls and people beating on their door trying to get them to invest in stocks and do all this stuff. It was pretty comical in the beginning, and then he turns this one right on its head. Didn't really see it coming.
No, I thought it was going to be one of these finance stories again when I saw that, but it definitely changed its direction.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at a couple of comments, and then I'm going to just see if we want to mention other stories or an overall feeling for the book.
I got a couple more I'd like to.
Yeah.
Just briefly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could do a 2-for-1 unless Matt picks one.
Limitless. Limitless was a pretty good picture, and that's right. How far can things be pushed when your mind is unleashed?
Oh yeah, the men with the Bene Gesserit.
Right. I've only seen it, the movie. I haven't actually read Dune. I kind of have been avoiding it because it's just too popular. Rather go into some more obscure stuff. Welcome, Constance. Thanks for joining us. All right, so why don't we mention some other stories then?
One I didn't really care for when I first read it, and then I read it again today, was The Snowmen, which is super short. It has like sparse world building, but it's really intriguing, and ultimately it's just about ignorant humanity screwing everything up. It's super short.
With heat pumps.
Yeah. And at first you're trying to figure out what's going on. You've got this guy calling up his casual girlfriend or something. He wants to come over for a visit. And there's a casual mention of them living under 4 miles of ice, and he's got to take his machine over to her place. It used to take 4 minutes, now it takes 10. So there's been some sort of ecology collapse or something, and he's ignoring radio messages from the government that are basically like, what government survives, cautioning people to turn off their heat pumps a certain period of time each day or something. Everybody is living under the ice and in these little shelters and just using these heat pumps, which are sucking heat out of the surrounding area to heat their homes. And he gets to the girlfriend's house and they're inside, and it's weird. It's like they're decadent but also deprived because they're lounging around drinking, but there's also mention that they're practically starving. They're eating rats and things. And there's a knock at the door, and it's an alien. It's so casual. It's an alien, and then you see the darker side of these people. They just see the alien as a mark, somebody they can profit from. So she distracts the alien while he goes through the alien's vehicle and loots it of technology and food. And when he gets back, the alien's not even in the room. She's like, I dealt with it. He had warnings. He was boring. He was talking about the hazards of the heat sinks, the heat pumps, just like the government. He was foolish and a bore. And I won't go any further, but it's like a cautionary tale, and they're blind to their own demise, their own faults, I guess. They're not good people, and they are screwing themselves.
Yeah, those heat sinks are just ruining the planet. That's what's made the planet so cold.
Yeah.
But they don't want to. They still want to use that energy that the heat sinks provide. So it's a vicious catch-22 with their desires and their use of the planet.
Well, you get the idea that society has basically collapsed. There's not much left. There's a small some sort of functioning government, and they're putting out warnings like, don't use your heat pump 24/7. That's how we got in this mess. But the few people left, like these guys, they couldn't care less. They just enjoy leisure. Like he listens to Beethoven all day and plays solitaire. Then he goes to visit his girlfriend.
And so this reminded me a lot about consumption, right? Once again, he's coming into this area of looking at our society with consumption and the desires and wants versus needs, and the tendency of all of us to just continue, even if we know something is not good for our planet or good for us, to continue to consume.
Exactly. That's the satire he'll throw in. That one was a little over the top, but still it does make you think, you know.
That one reminded me of Roald Dahl, if you've ever read any of his adult stories. No. Yeah, he had some vicious adult stories. Let's take a look at a couple comments here. Joe was here. Welcome, Joe.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I gotta find that one and read it, Joe, because Kornbluth would be on his mark with that one.
That one wasn't in our book, was it?
I don't think so.
No.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I have it in a collection here. I'll have to find that. There we go. Space Merchants is worth a read, definitely. I know that when I comment on some videos, sometimes there's a crown beside your name, and I'm not sure exactly what that means either. All right, take care, Chris. Thanks for joining us.
Free internet badges, probably.
Free internet. Oh, there you go. I don't know. Okay, Ira, you had a few that you wanted to touch on, I think.
Well, I think you got to mention the Midas Plague. That was one. That's like one of his most well-known from like 1954, and he later turned it into a novel or like pieced some stories around it. He didn't really expand it, but he wrote one that happens before and then some after called Midas World, I think, and it's pretty absurd. It's a hard concept to really get behind. And he talked about in the back how, what was it?
Horace Gold, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was an editor, Gold, who was trying to get an author to write a book on this premise, and everyone was turning him down. And then finally, Pohl had let it marinate enough in his head that he spit out the Midas Plague. And then everyone loved it, even to his surprise.
It flipped something of his too, right? That's what Horace is asking. It flipped, wasn't it the idea from Space Merchant? Anyway.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I think there was some, little tidbit that was in that one that he wanted expanded, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like a future where everything's backwards. It's funny because in the beginning, this couple who the whole story kind of revolves around, you know, they're talking about their lavish house and their many robots and all this stuff. And then she's just like depressed, and she goes to her husband and she goes, you know, why are we poor? It's like, what are you talking about, lady? And you find out in this society, the poor people have the most. And if you prove yourself by consuming enough, then you can go down to a smaller house. And, you know, the whole economy is based on consuming credits, whether you're using them or not. And it's, you know, it's like, it's an absurd cautionary tale. It's hard to really think too hard about this one and make it realistic, but it's an interesting concept and had some really cool twists at the end because the guy gets in trouble. He kind of gets his robots to kind of consume for him, which you're kind of thinking he's the first one that thought about this.
That's the thought I had.
What is this, the marching morons?
That's what I thought.
And so you're like, what is the IQ of this whole world like so low? But like he thinks of this and he's thinking he's going to get in trouble. And then there's like kind of a double twist at the end that makes it kind of worthwhile to read. But I really didn't like that one that much, but it's worth mentioning.
You know, I didn't either. but it seems to be a very famous story of his, one that a lot of people know. One of the things that was interesting is I saw that it's used sometimes, has been used in commerce schools and university as an example or a think piece to talk about.
Yeah. And then real quick, there was the book or the story The Hated from 1958.
Kind of felt PKD-ish.
Yeah, this one was definitely, it felt different than a lot of them. The overall tone, and it was a little on the, well, it was a lot on the dark side, but you find out this guy, he's in New York, and he's some sort of like veteran, and you find out he went on a mission to Mars, and they stuff 6 people in a spaceship the size of a Buick, I think he says. And so everybody ends up hating each other and wanting to kill each other. And they put them on drugs while they're there, while they're in the spaceship, so they don't kill each other. And every little tick that anybody has just gets under their skin. And then when they complete their mission, they get a pension. But what's really interesting is they basically quarantine all these 6 different astronauts in different places of the country, and they're not supposed to leave their zone because they're afraid if they bump into someone, they're going to just murder them on the street. And, you know, it was definitely dark. It had a couple twists to it because, I don't want to give too much away. It was a pretty short one, and it was definitely different than a lot of the other ones in here.
Definitely an interesting premise. I've always thought that being in a spaceship for a long time with a group of people, that's got to be one of the toughest things there is, psychology-wise.
That's why Barry Malzberg has all of his astronauts going insane, right?
Yeah. They're not even in ships too long.
Yeah, but I mean, it can be done. There's people that have lived on the space station for a long time, and
yeah,
I don't know if you ever got a chance to look at any of the shuttles. Like, I think we've seen 2 of the shuttles. There was one in Los Angeles, and I forget where the other one was. But you get to like look inside of it, and I mean, I can see where he's coming from. Like 6 guys stuffed in a Buick. That's what it's pretty much like.
I saw one in Seattle, I think, at the Boeing Museum as well.
Yeah, that was the other one. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that they even had an Earth habitat that they created. I'm not sure if it was in Arizona or that people stayed in for about a year.
Yeah.
I think there's a little movie about that, what happened to them.
Biodome.
Yeah.
Just kidding. I think that's the comedy with like Pauly Shore.
Yep.
The same premise.
Yeah. Actually, I think that there was even another comedy series on Netflix that was something like that too.
Yeah, I watched part of that. I can't remember.
I think I had Steve Carell in it.
Yeah. I don't remember much.
Oh, and there was a serious actor with him. Was it? It doesn't matter. Someone on the comments might come up with it.
But The Hated was one of the darker ones. But another one I liked that was also dark was The Census Takers.
Mm.
Did you guys enjoy that one?
And that's a little bit more subtle.
I read that one to my wife while we were camping last weekend because I was looking through and it's like, this one's pretty short. And she was just going, what is this guy's issue?
He's just really good at his job.
Mm-hmm.
Or you mean the author?
Yeah, both.
Yeah, just a dark overpopulation story.
Mm-hmm. With a guy he has 6 weeks to get this census done, and like he's running his crew, and there is no stopping progress. And if you break the laws, you don't want to even know what the consequences are.
And it's another one, super short with very sparse world building. He's really good at world building along the way.
Yeah.
And he makes it a bit of a mystery to start with. You have to piece it together, but as you say, it's short, so it doesn't take long.
Yeah.
It really keeps you engaged because you're curious. You kind of speculating what you think's going on, but he will eventually tell you more and more.
Perhaps this is why he was such a good editor too, is that he knew how to construct a story that didn't have, too much fat on it, that it just went for its goal or its theme.
Eventually, I think he ended up writing some really fat stories. Like, I don't know if I'll ever read some of the big ones but who knows?
There was one story that was in here that was directly applying to something that he missed out on, the space merchants, that he wanted to talk about. It was called Happy Birthday, Dear Jesus. And it was about advertising and a store that they were working hard in to prepare for Christmas. And then all of a sudden you discover, as he's pursuing a girl who doesn't want to work on a Sunday, that her family doesn't do that this preparation is all happening in September already, and that they're supposed to be working overtime for all the shoppers for Christmas. And I was thinking, that's not too far off anymore.
That's pretty close, yeah.
Yeah. Seems like Thanksgiving is, I don't know. Do they put out Christmas stuff before Thanksgiving in Saskatchewan? Or, sorry, in Saskatchewan, in the United States?
Yeah. Yeah, most places. Yeah.
Because Thanksgiving is the end of November in the United States. And so I would think that they do. I think in Canada, we definitely see it early November already.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
he also wrote like an essay about, I think, what was it called? How to Count on Your Fingers. And that was so interesting. Like he teaches you how like computers count. There's like math problems, or not really problems, but diagrams, and how like computers compute any number into binary language, ones and zeros. And I never understood that. And he wrote that in 1956.
It was kind of weird having that essay all of a sudden right in the middle. I kept on going, okay, is there going to be a twist here? Is this a story, or is it really just teaching us about binary?
Yeah.
I think there was another author that we had earlier that had some sort of essay about time travel in their stories as well.
Was Leiber or Frederik Brown?
Yeah.
Yeah.
About
I think it was about language and time travel,
DeCamp.
how it wouldn't really work.
DeCamp, right?
It was DeCamp, yeah.
Yeah, he wrote that whole essay, a couple essays in that one.
That was, for me, a hell of a lot better than a math lesson.
You didn't like that one?
I did not.
Yeah.
It was impressive, but I just didn't care for reading it.
Yeah, it's not for everyone.
Let's go to a few comments, and then we'll go for sort of your overall impression of this one.
Yeah.
His adult stories are worth reading, as many were turned into early episodes of Tales of the Unexpected. I think that was a British show. Oh, there we go.
That'd be interesting.
We haven't talked about the novel Gem yet.
Yeah, that's coming up. I'm going to be reading that here pretty soon. That's the last Pohl that's on that list that I'm reading through.
Yeah. Recall it features a planet with 3 very different non-human-like alien species and the 3 factions of human explorers. I know that's in my, I think I have it here too. It's one of those SF Masterworks as well.
Yeah.
I don't know. Matt, you haven't read any of the novels?
Of Pohl's?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, I mean, of Gem? Or the Gem one?
No.
No, okay. Best of...
I don't know if I have that one. I'll have to look.
Okay. Well, with online, we can always find it. That's true. And Bill likes that we mentioned Biodome. My mistake, I think. Longest stay in space, Russian cosmonaut Valery Polyakov, 437 days. Okay.
Yeah, and is he the guy that has a twin brother or something? Like they estimated that he aged like 1 second or a fraction of a second less than everybody down here on Earth.
Well, seeing some of those astronauts who were sort of stranded coming back to Earth, it looks like they kind of age when they're out there.
Oh yeah.
371 for the American one, Frank Rubio. So both of those are over a year. Yeah, that's one of the other areas of space travel. The things that it does to your body, and just the type of radiation that you'd be exposed to. I've heard some people say that it's basically almost going to be impossible to really go to Mars and to survive on Mars. And if you do go to somewhere, let's say the moon, you basically have to burrow into the moon to try and use the regolith as a screen from everything that's going to be bombarding you. So we all love science fiction, but there's a lot to be answered for in terms of safety for humans.
Have you read Red Mars?
A long time ago, yes.
Yeah. On their way to Mars, there's a solar storm, and he goes into great detail about how just that extra radiation could kill you right there. And I think they seek refuge in like a water storage tank.
Yeah, that's what I remember. Like the
cool.
whole ship, right? They put it between them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To kind of slow it down. That was really cool. Although I think years later he talked about how none of it's really that feasible. I don't like to think about that though, because I want to see the human race get off the planet.
Yeah, I mean you'd just be living underground, like Richard said, getting like shielded from all the radiation. And
well, not if you go the Man Plus route.
you could go there. They're looking for volunteers.
I think I'd rather just digitally upload my consciousness to some sort of robot.
Yeah,
that sounds a little bit more feasible. Or just remote control, right? Get your brain into it and just go around.
It takes place in one of these stories, actually.
Like Avatar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bone density.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Definitely.
Bad for your heart. All kinds of stuff.
Yeah. I think your spine kind of expands, and so they have some back problems when they come back. Biosphere 2. There we go.
Yeah.
It's the real experiment.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dennis. Oh.
Well put.
That sounds like a quote. Unless L Space is just really good with its own quips. Or her quips.
I've got to read that soon, yeah.
That's one of the more enjoyable Heinleins, I think. In some ways also, I think it really sort of puts out some of his philosophy or thoughts in terms of how things should be structured. It's an interesting story. I could accept the longer exposition passages on his positions in that one even better than the one that you just recently read, Starship Troopers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got in a big Mars kick after reading the Mars trilogy, and there's that guy, I think his name is Robert Zubrin, who's like, he's already come up with the plan. He hates NASA for, wasting all these resources and everything. And he says you got to bypass the moon. There's nothing on the moon. You don't even want like a space station on the moon. You just want to like slingshot straight to Mars. He's very controversial.
So the consciousess uploaded into a machine shows up here.
Yeah. And then it gets even more as you go further into the Hichi novels. Gets really interesting, when you finally, like the first book, you never even get to meet the aliens or anything.
And Pohl has that in one of these stories from 1960, the day the Icicle Works closed.
That one was really good too. Yeah.
Consciousness upload in one of those too.
Yeah, I almost picked that one. You want to say a little bit about that story?
See, Matt, he knew about binary math and how you could make that work.
Someone else talked. I can't remember much about that one. I just remember that particular part.
Well, it's like a boom and bust society, right? So this planet had this magnificent, like ice patterns that were colorful, and they had some way of like capturing them. It wasn't like fully explained.
No, it was very out there. You didn't really understand what is this icicle factory thing. But
Yeah, and they would send it off, and this planet was just making tons of money, and this corporation doing it was huge. And then some Yahoo out there found some like synthetic way to make a duplicate, like rip off of these things. And so like the whole works shut down, and everyone, because it takes so long to travel and so much money, they're just like stuck on this planet with like no jobs, basically.
Oh, and a really cool concept, which I first read in a Carolyn Ives Gilman novel. She hasn't written much, so I won't be surprised if you don't know her. It was a novel from 2010s called Dark Orbit. But some of these people, after the industry had collapsed on this planet, if they had the money, they were paying to leave to another planet. But if they didn't have the money to physically do that, they could still pay to have their consciousness, shot out to another planet and just upload into probably a robot. Maybe they had clone bodies or something, but I've always been fascinated with that idea of traveling by just breaking yourself down into a pattern. Traveling as light, basically.
Yeah.
oh, Cameron Hurley had something like that too. The Light Brigade.
The Light Brigade, yeah.
Yeah. I don't read a lot of sort of more modern novels, but I read that one. I liked it.
Yeah, that's kind of how those two things lead to one another. In that story, when everyone is kind of like they don't have jobs, they can rent their bodies out so that people elsewhere
Tourism.
as tourism, enter into their head, and they have to go. Their consciousness has to be kind of like stored somewhere, and they have options of where they want to go and what they want to do. It's very
So it's
interesting.
like you leave Earth digitally, and it probably feels instant for you. You wake up on the other planet. It's like 20 years have already gone by. You see the sights in someone else's body and abuse it, because why not?
Yeah.
Drugs, sex, alcohol, who cares? It's not your body. Then you shoot yourself digitally back home.
Yep.
And that's where it's so tragic, is these people wake up with their bodies having been just horribly abused by whoever the tourist was.
Yeah.
Was that not in Neuromancer? Didn't Molly do that? Or I can't remember. Having your body rented out, I mean.
I don't remember
all that.
Yeah.
I might be thinking of something else.
Yeah.
I thought that was one of the reasons she was so dark and disturbed.
So, overall thoughts?
Well, he's. I mean, I say this every time. It was a surprise. I mean, I hadn't read any Pohl really, so that's not saying much. But very versatile, very like the sparse world building. He's really good at long stories and short. And I was surprised. I think I said earlier, like there's not a lot of your typical science fiction tropes. There was not much space opera, if any. There's no time travel or multiverse stuff. And he came up with some really cool stuff really early on, like the Day Million. I mean, the Lem novel and a short story by Brian Aldiss are three things that really blew me away of what I read in modern day science fiction, but was written by these guys way in the past. So I was surprised. I shouldn't be, because he was writing for 70 years, and he was
5 years
editor, and yeah, he's someone I want to look into much more and definitely read his novels.
Yeah, so I'd only read a couple of his short stories. I've read maybe like 6 novels, and most of them being the Heechee. I read all 4 of the Heechee novels. There's one he wrote later that I haven't read yet, but yeah, I like that he does do things a bit different. If you look at the cover of Gateway and you look at the cover of this, you're thinking, like Matt said, just space opera stuff. And you get very little of that. It's more about the human condition and, society and his satire. He's got a pretty interesting range. And, I'd seen all of his books around for decades, and I always just blew him off as like somebody that was just like, when you see so many books from one author, you're like, how good can they really be? But so far, I've been picking his best stuff mostly, but everything I've read from him, I really enjoy. And there was maybe like 3 or 4 out of these. Yeah, maybe like there was, about 3 or 4 of them that I didn't really care for out of the 19. So, yeah, more wins than losses.
I think you could definitely see that he was an editor who practiced what he probably did with other people's stories with his own stories, and so they came in a way that just was ready to get to the center of what he wanted to do, whether it was a world building or whether it was a very short story with some sort of a punch to it. And I keep coming back to the point where so much of his stuff is about business, finance, PR work, advertising. And even when he goes into psychology type of stuff, it's usually psychology about want or consumerism or desire. And he became those themes that run through his stories and his novels were something that was very different from other people's looks at science fiction universes. I think that's why Space Merchant became such a famous novel, because of the subject matter for that one. There was one political story in here as well that we've mentioned, I think, right? That was the census taker.
Yeah, well, there was the Children of Night, which was really, yeah.
So that versatility is very interesting, and I don't think I see that in a lot of authors in this age that he was writing in.
Yeah.
So there we go, from Kornbluth to Pohl. I don't know, Matt. We haven't talked about this. Have you? I think you're next on the rotation of our channels. Do you have a book that we're going to read?
Yeah, I made this choice for 2 reasons. I've read maybe nothing by this author, unless there's a short story I forget. And also there's a particular short story by him that I've wanted to read for quite some time. And that is The Best of James Blish. I think you've both read A Case of Conscience. Have you read anything else? Oh, you haven't?
No. I read Cities in Flight a long time ago.
Okay.
The 4 novels, and I've read some of his Star Trek work. There's a very famous story in that book that I've read as well. Surface Tension.
That's the one I have wanted to read for quite some time. And the afterword is his pseudonym that he used as a science fiction critic, which was William Athling Jr. I have a couple books of his criticisms on science fiction and stuff, and yeah, the afterword is by him under his pseudonym.
Criticizing himself?
Yeah, I've read the first page of it, and it looks like it's going to be a pretty interesting read.
Nice. I read one of his books in the Ace Science Fiction Special Series 1, and I really didn't like it. It was the first James Blish that I really almost hated on. There's not too many books I give like a 3 out of 10, but that was one, I think.
I also wanted a collection with less stories. I think the one we just read had 19. This has 12.
Okay. Yeah. I remember when we did Lee Brackett, that was one that just had probably less than 10 stories in it too.
I think Fritz, one of them had 21.
Oh,
Frederik Brown had like 40.
Brown?
Yeah,
he had
that
like
was
40.
A lot.
Seriously, I think there was 40 some stories, because some of them were like that.
Yeah, there were multi one-page.
Yeah.
All right, we should get in the comments here, and I think what we'll do is we'll go through the comments. As long as we're chatting with some people for a little while here, we can do that. I don't want to hold you guys, say, longer than 2 hours. We're about 1:45 in here. So let's see what we got here.
Minutes, yeah. I got about 15 minutes tops.
Good. Okay. So I
was going to check too if the Blish have a book club?
A hardcover? I don't know. I doubt it because I haven't seen it.
No.
I can't remember the Waveries by Frederik Brown. We did read the best of Frederik Brown. I'm not sure if it was in there. He wrote so many stories.
Yeah. I'll pull it up. I think there was 47 stories.
I'm not sure it's that big, but there's
there was
stories, right?
There was 30.
Yeah.
30 stories. And I don't see the Waverleys in there.
That was a fun one. Had a big mouse on the cover, if I remember right. Which actually made sense eventually.
Yeah, and I still remember the one, what's it called, where the battle?
Arena,
yes.
Classic.
Yeah. People know that one because of the Star Trek episode of the same name. And then they go, oh, this is very different than the Star Trek episode, but similar concept.
So that question right there, read Rogue Moon by Aldous Budrys.
Ah, that's
and I think
right.
I think it might be a difference. One of those other stories in here involving consciousness transfer, although I don't think there are any other than Day Million. But there was a line that mentions they stop just short of something when they're recording your consciousness so that it is you and not a duplicate. But I can't remember if it was this story that he's referring to or not. That is the debate, right? Having yourself copied digitally.
Sold.
All right.
Hello, Dagan. If I remember right, this is another Canadian here. Frederik Pohl, very cool. Bart has joined us. Welcome, Bart.
I'd like to see what Bart thinks about Gateway. I don't know if Bart's going to like Gateway. It's got a pretty unlikable character in the beginning doing.
Yeah. Well, he read Anathem lately or recently. That's a big one from Stevenson. Dagon loves Gateway. Oh, here we go. Molly Millions on Chrissy Hines' photo on her first Pretenders album. Interesting. I could see that. That makes sense to me. Just likes the Heechy stuff. Hey, it's pretty late over there, Gareth. I'm good to see you on.
Yeah, hey, Gareth. Hey, Gareth, I finally read my first Sheckley. I don't know if you saw that, but Gareth, I think Sheckley is one of his favorite authors, and it was a lot of fun.
I was on one of his live feeds where he asked me to pick out 10 movies that I would take to a desert island or something like that. So it was a lot of fun chatting with him. And some people are saying hi to each other.
Good. That's good to hear.
Thank you, Joseph. Glad to hear that. I don't think we've been disappointed really with any of these. There's been a lot of discovery. The big discovery was not Stanley. Raymond Z. Galoon.
Yeah.
Right. Did we read the Stanley Weinbaum one?
Not yet.
I have, and I think you'll both feel similar to Galoon.
Okay. Well, I know I've read one famous story of his from the Science Fiction Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
But I haven't read the rest.
Yeah, I've read that. That's the only thing I've read from Weinbaum.
Yeah. Super important story in the canon of SF.
Totally. And Matt, you recently got those two Weinbaum paperbacks.
Yeah, they'll be in a future book haul. I was very excited to find those.
Yeah, those are awesome.
They had nice complimentary covers too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're part of a series, but I don't think they are.
It's funny when I send you guys pictures. I'm like, look at these rare books I found. I finally found them. Ira's always like, oh, yeah, I got those.
I don't. I think Ira has surpassed my library like 2 times.
Yeah, you can't even see my other wall over here. It's all paperbacks in this room, too. There's no hardbacks.
If you get a chance, Matt, you should come down to Ira sometime and take a look. And they've got a great bookstore down in Montana. They're called Bonnie's, Aunt Bonnie's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oops. Let's go. Yeah, I read those. Yes. I remember the very first Star Trek book that they had of his. They had it like a rocket exhaust coming out of the nacelles and the bottom of the ship. And I'm just going, oh, that's wrong. The artist didn't quite know what to make of Star Trek at that point. Well, we'll learn together, Joe.
Yeah, Case of Conscience is good.
Yeah. Cities in Flight. Once again, I kind of have this, it's not a bipolar, but I had a time up to around 1990, 95 where I read a lot. And then I just kind of stayed with life and fast novels to read, not as many science fiction. And then I came back to it about 2 or 3 years ago. So that was from my earlier sessions of reading novels. I just remember liking it a lot. And it was a very thick book at that time because I had all 4 novels.
Yeah, I've found some of the old small, I think, Avon paperbacks of the individual novels of that one.
Yeah. He saw your Sheckley video.
Nice.
We will.
We just
will
did,
get
didn't
to
we?
it.
Yeah.
We haven't done that one yet.
No, we haven't.
Yeah, Preston Del Rey.
Sorry, I was thinking of Sprague de Camp. No, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think I've read anything from Lester Del Rey.
Once again, I
No,
read
me
an older novel of his, but I think he also had some juveniles, if I remember right.
Yeah, I think I have one like Moon Mutiny or something.
Oh, yeah.
We'll get to him. He's one of the 21.
Yep. Got to feed
Great to
those
see you,
kids.
Dennis. I'm taking that's cats, not kids.
That'd be kiddies, maybe.
On how and where and when to read, like hiding in the basement, away from chores and bills and lawns. Yeah. Where do people read? Well, maybe a few people can answer that. That would just be an open question that would be fun to talk about, I guess. How about just briefly, where do you guys like to read?
Usually in the living room because it's well lighted, and yeah.
Yeah, I have a spot in the morning in the living room where I read. And then when it's nice here in Montana, we have a deck that's bathed in the sun. And there's just some shady spots if I get too hot. I love sitting outside and reading in the summer.
I have started sitting outside now that I have a lawn, but it is damn hot lately, so I haven't done much outdoor reading.
Actually, when you first started this collection, Matt, you showed us a picture outside.
Did I?
Yeah.
I don't remember.
And Richard made a comment that it gets better.
Yes. Yeah. I thought that was funny because it was the first page, like the best ever.
So anyways, that's a good idea. I'm not sure if I'm reading to avoid things, but it's become sort of part of my routine, and my wife is supportive and understands it. If the people don't know, I'm retired, so this is sort of a retirement project, cheaper than golf.
Yeah.
There we go. Well, we're
first edition original hardbacks. Maybe that could exceed it.
Yeah. We're going to get to Weinbaum sometime. Oh, yeah.
Thanks,
you would
Gareth.
love it, Gareth.
Yeah, if you come across the pond, come to Montana. I'll give you a tour.
It's a beautiful state. Some great bookstores.
I'd say come in the summer, but Richard was here in like November. It wasn't too bad.
No. I think there's a little bit of snow melting and then a little bit of snow as we were leaving, but it was great. We were outside. It wasn't bad.
It wasn't no Arizona. That's where you were heading.
Yeah. And I came from Manitoba, so it's definitely better weather-wise. Gareth is encouraging us, I think, to keep on going with the live. College library. That is a good place. I
Yeah.
had a favorite corner of the college library that I loved to go to study and to read.
Our
That was back
local,
in the days where you had card catalogs in college. A lot of people don't even know what card catalogs are anymore.
yeah,
I do a little bit in bed, but
puts me
yeah.
to sleep. But I have started reading short stories. I'll tell myself like, okay, I look and see how many pages. Okay, I can get through this one, and I'll be starting to nod sometimes. But it's opened up an extra avenue of getting a little bit more reading in.
Yeah. Actually, and with these books here that we're doing, uh, I'm finding that it's great to be reading a novel, and all of a sudden when I need a break from something, I'm reading right now Lord of Light by Rogers Lasney. It's a little intense
Yeah,
and sometimes hard to get through. And so it's always fun to go and read a short story or two and then come back to it. I find it really difficult to read through an entire short story book without anything else.
yeah. I don't think I've done that on any of these. Just read them straight through. I think I've always like picked a few off here and there, and then read something, then come back to it. Which we've all had the challenge when we do these videos. Some of the stories we've read have been like a month or so ago, and you're trying to remember.
I was having some trouble today, and I always count on you guys to help me out.
We'll fill in the gaps between the three of us.
Yeah. Comfortable leather club chair in the bedroom. Nice.
Nice.
Awesome. Good to hear that you're enjoying reading as well. I found that my work life, I did a lot of computer work with my teaching as well. And I found that my concentration wasn't as good for reading a book as it used to be. But that came back with practice. But I was a little bit shocked because I'd always start to think, oh, is there an email? Is something happening here? I couldn't read on an iPad, say, because there was just too many other programs behind there that I could get access to. So getting the physical book in front of me again was what I needed. And if you're a person who has trouble with attention span or in-depth focus, it can come back. It's just a matter of practice.
Exactly. Nice.
I think he just recently was in New York from one of his videos. Japanese horror. Oh, you need to, if you haven't gone to Chris Liminal Spaces, that's where you need to go. My wife likes reading in the tub, and I always tell her, don't take a book that you want to keep, or don't take something that's, we've taken from the library, because sometimes you get those well-fanned, open, wrinkled pages by the end of it.
Yeah, don't drop it in the bubble bath. See,
That's a question I have.
Yeah.
Do you guys like reading a couple books at a time, or do you like to focus on a book?
Only if one of the books is a short story collection.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't read 2 novels at once.
I used to do that all the time. And then when I started the channel, I wanted to read one book and then try to do a video before I started the next one while it was like in my head. And now I'm hooked on that. I usually completely finish a novel before I go into something else, unless it's like nonfiction or something like that.
Mm. Yeah. All right, let's see if we can catch up here. Name is Legions on the movie Phantasm. Okay. I have no idea. I haven't seen. Oops. This person. I'll go back to this one. If I'm super into one, I focus on that. But otherwise, I like to read and retain more. It's interesting, bouncing back and forth. I could see some people that would work. For me, it's not. I need a little bit more focus. And as for this one here, I don't know. I haven't read Name is Legion, so I'm not sure if that would play into whatever the plot is for Phantasm. Any idea, guys? No. Okay. I know. I think I've seen Joe actually post some pictures on somebody's community page. Yeah. Good stuff, Joe. Hey, Dad Like Book. That's a new. I don't know if you guys have seen his channel. He's a new booktuber, reading much the same books that we love to read. Well, just to say hi, Dad. Thanks for coming in, and we hope you enjoyed the video.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that we tend to consume books a little bit faster than most people would, doing the things that we do here with the channels as well. So it's pretty common for me to read a couple books in a week.
Yeah, it helps that a lot of vintage science fiction books are under 200 pages.
That's true.
And a modern fantasy book 1 of 7 is like 1,000 pages.
Yeah.
But
I agree there, Gareth. I think we're at the end of the comments. I think this is time that we should say goodbye. Thank you again to Ira and Matt for joining me in reading Frederik Pohl. You can find our next video coming up sometime on Matt's channel. We'll be reading James Blish. Looking forward to it.
yeah, and thanks for all the comments, everyone. And thank you guys. Yeah. It's always fun.
So great to have this kind of interaction directly with the people who are reading instead of typing comments to each other, which works, but this is a lot more fun, I think, and can discuss some of the things that they're bringing up.
Yep.
All right. Any last words?
Just thanks for having us.
Live long and prosper.
Make sure you check out all these channels. Take care, everyone. Bye.
See ya.